morning and welcome to Love Every Moment, coming to you today from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today's verse is 1 Peter 2:18. Servants, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. Now this again comes after verse 12, which we covered way back here, that talks about keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles. And Peter's establishing a very firm theme here to submit. He starts with submit to the government. That includes the king. And we are to even honor the king. We have to practice that submission even if the king and the government are corrupt. And they probably are. Now we have submit to your boss. And we have to submit to him or her even if that person is corrupt. This was written in a time of slavery, so we were talking about slaves being submissive to their masters. That's really quite an ask, but this is what Christianity should be about, is submission. The Bible talks about submitting to all kinds of people. Husbands are to submit to their wives. Wives are to submit to their husband. Children are to submit to their parents. And lay people are to submit to the church leaders. And here, submit to the government, submit to your boss, submit to the king. All kinds of submission should happen. And that's because we are to love him more than anyone else or anything else in our lives. And we allow the Holy Spirit to run the show. We are submitting first to him, and from there it should be a little bit easier to submit to everyone else when he's running the show. Again, we could say, but my boss is corrupt. I'm an RVer. I've worked several summer jobs, and then I happen to vagabond the rest of the year. But I've had some good bosses. I've had some less than good bosses, I'll admit. But I have to submit to them. This is what it's saying here. And you say, I can't do it. This boss is just ridiculous. Well, think about this. Let's go all the way back to Matthew 5:44 that we covered way back here. That says, I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And again, you might say, but they don't deserve my love. They don't deserve my prayers. That's true. But when the Holy Spirit is running the show, he can make that happen within us. It's really his love coming out of us, and therefore his submission coming out of us well. Let's consider an Old Testament example and a New Testament example. In the Old Testament, you had Joseph. Well, he was sold into slavery by his brothers. He didn't deserve that. So now he's a slave of Potiphar. And he does his darn best to work for him, all right? And even though Potiphar is a corrupt person, eventually Potiphar accuses Joseph of coming on to his wife when really the truth was the other way around, and ends up throwing Joseph into jail. Joseph still submits all the way, and eventually God honors that. Think about the New Testament. We have Onesimus, who was a runaway slave and found Paul, became a Christian, started ministering with Paul. And Paul says to Onesimus, you need to go back to your master Philemon and straighten things out, make things right with him. And if that means you got to be a slave all over again, then so be it. You submit yourself. Now, Paul does send him a letter, the letter to Philemon, that you can read, and it asks Philemon to allow Onesimus to continue to minister, but he's to submit no matter what. If Philemon disagreed, then Onesimus was going to be a slave all over again. One other thing to think about is from the boss's point of view. If I were a boss and hired people, I would probably not be a perfect boss, I'll admit that. But if I'm hiring someone and paying them my money to them, I want them to do things my way. And if they disagree, if I'm a nice guy, I might listen to them. But eventually, ultimately it's my choice. I'm paying for it. It's my business. I want it to be done my way. So going back to our main verse, it all comes down to loving him more than anyone else or anything else, which allows us to submit. So let's choose to love every moment, because then we're going to love every moment. I'm your average Drudge, and I hope you have a great week.